All right, everyone. I want to thank you first for listening to this podcast, for supporting this podcast that I've been doing for several years now. Today, as I'm recording this, it is Friday, April 8th, 2022. And a couple days ago, I was interviewing someone for the podcast, and, we sit and chat via Zoom for a couple minutes before we actually start recording. And this particular guest asked me, you've been doing this for however many interviews, what keeps you going? And I thought to myself, I said this to her, shared this with her. I said, it's getting to speak with people who are passionate about what they do, who love what they do, who are just in the zone, who are just so attached and absorbed with their calling, in a sense. That just gets me going. It gets me, I could feel it now. It just gets me so excited. Like, there's no question about it, right? They are doing what they're supposed to do. And then when you put on top of that this whole issue of trauma and helping people who've been impacted by trauma, just really inspires me. And that in turn activates those parts, that aspect, that core of myself. And I said this to her. I said, when I get off my interviews, I am just so excited most of the times that in fact, I was getting so excited that I just said, what am I going to do with this? I need to bottle this up, because usually I don't publish my episodes until 2 months out. Okay. Now Apple has this subscription thing. It's called Apple Plus, where you can access the episodes pretty much soon after I publish them, ad-free for a nominal fee of $5 a month or whatever. But before that, I wasn't publishing it at all. But what I did instead is I started recording these kind of reaction videos. I just wanted to share that with you. And so that's why I do that. And that really has been making me think a lot these past few days, just about, what I'm doing and the journey of this podcast and the journey of really myself. When I first started, let me get a sip of coffee here. When I first started this whole thing, this whole journey, even actually before the podcast started, I've shared some of this before. I was writing fiction for a long time, maybe 25, 30 years ago. Loved it. I would spend a lot of time writing fiction. I didn't get my novels published, but I was writing and I was just reading a lot and just loved it. And I had been doing that for maybe 4, 5, 6 years. And I, out of the blue, got a phone call from someone that I had been working with a few years prior. And I remember I was done for the day. It was the afternoon. It was Los Angeles. It was a beautiful afternoon, sitting in this room. The lights were out, and just natural light from the afternoon coming in the window, and the phone rings. And it's this woman that I had worked with, and she was calling everyone she knew to tell them that she had been living with AIDS for the last 9 years. And basically, she was calling to say goodbye. And I remember feeling in that moment a mix of feelings. Holy shit. Fear for her, fear in myself, but there was an overriding emotion, and that was just awe. I was so blown away by how courageous this woman was and how strong she was to be able to handle what she appeared to be going through. Basically facing what seemed to be her death. And I thought to myself, when I hung up that phone, I thought to myself, I mean, first of all, I remember sitting there and it felt like just this fiery javelin had been shot through my core. And I felt to myself that there's no way I had that strength, that there's no way. I thought to myself that I would be as courageous, could be as courageous as she was. And in that moment, right in that moment, I said to myself, something needs to change for me. I need to get up and go. As much as I loved writing, as much as I loved what I was doing, I felt like I needed to live what I was writing about, that I needed to live and find my courage, find my strength, find my willingness to just to dive into life. And that set me off on this journey of confronting my fears, testing myself. I went on this vision quest and believe me, I am no mountain man at all. I went on this week-long vision quest in Northern California that was amazing. And I wanted to just challenge myself and confront my fears and find out where my strength was. And that led me to this 2-week winter outward bound dog sledding, mountaineering course, and then a survival course. Actually, another mountain climbing course, and then a survival course out in the Utah desert. And this, as I'm describing it here, took place probably over the course of 6-7 months. And this survival course was 2 weeks. And again, I am not a outdoor person. You know, I go out with guides and stuff like that. But this course was in the summer in the Utah desert, in the middle of nowhere. And we had these 3 guides who were just incredible. This was with Boulder Outdoor Survival School. And I remember the first 4 days of this 14-day trip, we had no food. We did have water, but we had no food. And we were carrying basically the clothes we had on our back. At night, just huddling together to stay warm. Hiking all day, pretty strenuous. I remember I got super nauseous one day. Oh my God, I literally green. I could not go on. I remember lying down just on this rock, and someone said to me, "Guy, just stay down." I said, "Oh my God, what do I look like?" He said, "You're green." And anyway, I got better, but there was a moment, I think it might have been a few days in, where one of the other members got really sick and started hallucinating, and this guy was freaking out and didn't want to go on. And the other guides, or the guides, were sitting back. And I didn't know this at the time, but now I know this, that they were waiting for some of us to step up and help this guy. So unbeknownst to myself that this was their method, myself and this other girl, we stepped up and we started helping this guy. We started carrying him. We started dragging him. We started, keeping him out of the shade where we could, just encouraging him. And all the while we're trekking, right? We're going on, we're hiking. And that was the moment when I said to myself, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to help people in these circumstances, in dire circumstances. Was I scared? Yes. Did I know what the heck I was doing? No. But that was the moment. I can point back right to that. And when I got home, I was just on fire. You come back from these trips and you are just so inspired. And I was. And I said to myself, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to go into emergency medicine. I want to become a physician. And this was kind of out of the box for me. I mean, I in no way excelled at sciences when I was growing up. In fact, I grew up with this thought that I wasn't really that smart. I mean, I knew I was creative, but I really wasn't that smart. But this is what I wanted to do. So I went back after 18 years. But by this time, I was like 34. And so here I was. I decided to go back to school to get my BA. I had to finish my BA. Because after high school, I had gone to 1 year of what was Philadelphia College of Art, and I dropped out after 1 year to play music. But anyway, so I decided to go back and get my BA, and I entered a Harvard Extension program to get my bachelor's, right? So here I was in Los Angeles, went all the way across back to the East Coast where I'm originally from, and enrolled in their bachelor's program, taking all the sciences to get into medical school, and I just did not do well at all. I mean, it was really, really scarring for me. That's a whole other episode here. But that whole journey in and of itself, not doing well, realizing that I needed to shift gears and not listening to the messages that people were telling me. Colleagues were saying, Guy, why are you, with all due respect, why are you in this program? You should not be a physician. You should be a therapist. You should be guiding people in this other way. And I just kind of dismissed that. I didn't listen to me. I didn't listen to my heart. I didn't listen to my core. I didn't listen to my own voice. And this is what this is about. This is what this episode is about. How long does it take for me to listen to what is going on inside ourselves? This is what my podcast really has become about. This is what I've learned from interviewing all of these over 600 people now. Over 600 people who are in this field, who are specializing in trauma, who are working with people who've been impacted by trauma, who, for the most part, are passionate about their work. This is the message that I'm getting. When I first started this, I had a series. If you've been with me for a while, you know that when I first started, I had a series of questions that I asked every guest. And one of those was, can you share an early clinical error? I mean, it's a great question. A lot of people love it. I don't know why I don't ask it. I got to keep reminding myself to ask it. But when people are open and honest, I mean, some guests are like, well, I don't make any mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Of course we do, right? But it allows those of us who are not as experienced to hear people who are more seasoned share their errors, their mistakes, how they screwed up, right? But I thought that the responses I'd be getting would be more in the line of, well, this technique didn't work. I forgot that I wanted to implement this particular intervention or that intervention. No, it wasn't like that at all. What happened was people started talking about errors or slips in their own vulnerability, right? I didn't allow myself to be open enough. I didn't allow myself to be vulnerable enough. I didn't feel like I could connect or wanted to or was able to bond with my client, this person in front of me, I was scared. I was fearful. I was hiding behind my own interventions. And hearing this over and over and over again really made me realize that that was me. That was exactly how I got into this field. When I got into graduate school, I thought to myself, here I was entering as a quote unquote later student. I was 37, 38 or whatever like that. And, I'd been in my own therapy for several years, did my own work, was willing to do the work and been around the block. I kind of figured I had that, that figured out, right? That I didn't need to work on that. And my goal, my mission instead was to ingest everything I could about trauma in order to become the best trauma therapist I could become. What book do I need to read? What workshop do I need to go to? What teacher do I need to talk to who's going to help me do this? Become an amazing trauma therapist. That's what I wanted to do. I was scared. Still, I was scared about working with kids and hearing these crazy stories, these awful stories. But still, despite that, I felt that I could do this work, that I could walk into the fire, in a sense, of someone who'd experienced trauma and quote unquote help them, be there with them. And so what I didn't realize was how vital my own heart, my own vulnerability, my own ability to connect with my client, the person sitting in front of me, how vital, if not the most important thing, right? How vital that was. I spent a lot of time depending on accumulating knowledge. And the reason for that is because, again, I came into this thinking that I wasn't that smart, that I needed to be smarter. And so that's why I leaned on that. But what I've realized is that, and again, so many of my guests have taught me this, being able to sit with someone, to be with someone who's experienced trauma, being able to connect with them, to hold them, to create a space for them where they feel safe, where, as Janina Fisher would say, where their nervous system feels regulated, right? Is crucial. It's vital. And I think that is underestimated. And I realize as I'm talking here, this doesn't just apply to the trauma space or therapy. I mean, this applies to everything we humans are involved with, relationships specifically. Being able to have control of oneself, to be aware of one's own triggers, to have worked with those triggers before they even got into the room with that client, being able to manage their own thoughts, emotions, states, so that we can be, you can be, I can be present with someone who has experienced trauma, interpersonal trauma, where their own self-trust, their own self-belief is pretty much out the window, right? Being able to do that and sit with that is so profound. I mean, we Think about it. When you meet someone who is just in their zone, who I say is in their zone, who is authentic, who is genuine, what does that mean? Who is just comfortable, so comfortable with themselves, and I don't mean that they have to be some kind of a Zen master, but they're just in the moment, right? It's a beautiful thing. It's an attractive thing. Not in the sexual sense, but just in the human sense. We are drawn to that. And I'm drawn to that because I think it gives us permission to trust our own self, to trust our own being, to trust our own idiosyncrasies and all those incredible, beautiful, crazy things that make up who we are. I had the privilege of being interviewed on a new podcast that came out a few months ago. It's called the Pivotal Stories Project. The host is Alan Hoteling, Pivotal Stories Project. And Alan is a great host. He asks great questions, and he asked, one of the questions he asked to all of his guests is, about story. The power of stories, the importance of stories. How do you see what do you think of when you think of the importance of story? And to me, it really made me think about the stories we tell about ourselves, about who we are, and how powerful those are, and how oftentimes we just run with them. We have these stories kind of overlaid onto us by our parents, by society, by school, by whomever and whatever. And oftentimes we just go with it, right? That's the story we have absorbed into us, ingested into us, and we run with it. But it doesn't always have to be like that, right? We can flip that story. We can change that story. We can stop and interrupt that story. And to a certain degree, that's what I'm trying to do with my own self. I said, I got into this whole field really believing that I wasn't that smart. Like I needed to be smarter. And I've shared the genesis of that story elsewhere, but that really impacted, not to mention my own trauma experience, impacted, my self-belief, my self-confidence, my self-esteem, and how I showed up and what I feel I needed to have or do in order to show up the way I wanted to. But what I want to get at here is the power of ourselves, the beauty of the nooks and crannies that make us who we are, that differentiate us from each other, the little crags and cracks that maybe sometimes we don't want to share with others, and maybe oftentimes we spend a lot of time covering up because of how we think others might view us or perceive us. And I think my own journey has been a constant digging and uncovering of my own self, and what it means to be me and to thrive. Remember, I started out wanting to become a physician and then getting into graduate school and getting my doctorate as a clinical psychologist. And here I am. I have my own business as a podcaster, as someone who helps others, hopefully inspires others to learn about trauma. And the more I do this, really, the more I think I want to inspire people to value themselves, to be themselves, to find the beauty of that, because that, right, being able to own that, to value that, to honor that, who you are in all of your complexity, right, and being content with that, to essentially love that. When you radiate that, that is I believe, the most powerful modality when you're sitting with someone who's been impacted by trauma. Because don't forget, oftentimes when we're speaking about complex trauma or interpersonal trauma, that self-trust, that self-love has been ripped from their core. And to share that with someone, and I'm not saying it's a magic pill, right? But I'm saying they're really, that is probably one, if not one of the most valuable things that someone else can offer to someone else. That non-judgmental beingness, that connection, that love of humanity, that human beingness, as Manuela Mishka-Reeds has shared on this podcast. Being able to share that is life-affirming. And my feeling is that it's not so easy. Simple, yes, but not so easy, because it requires and demands of you, the therapist, to look at your own story, to explore your own story, to dig into it, to uncover the things that you've spent so much time, like we all do, hiding, covering up, for fear of what others might think of us, for fear of what we might think of ourselves. But for me, that's the power of human beingness, is getting to that point where we can trust ourselves and we can share that with not just, if it's a client, but our family members and our partners, our kids. And believe me, as I say this, I do not have all this figured out by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I am a husband who is not perfect. I am a father who is not perfect. I am a business person who is not perfect. I have a lot of imperfections, and I'm working through this. But this journey of honoring who we are, who you are, and sharing that with yourself and your clients, to me is a beautiful thing. It's a magnetic thing. It's a radiating force that keeps me going. I just want to leave you with that. I hope you have an awesome weekend. Again, thank you so much for listening. Shoot me an email, guy@thetraumatherapistproject, if you can. If you're enjoying this podcast, head over to Apple Podcast and leave a review. It really helps get the word out and keeps this boat afloat. All right, take care.